Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to cover how to get really sharp pictures of birds in flight. Now excuse the noise in the background because I'm on the causeway again near Colchester, because this is a really great place for birds in flight, and you know there's no way you can avoid cars coming past and the noise in the background. Anyone that's been following my channel for any amount of time will know I hate noise in the background, but I'm just going to have to put up with it on this occasion. So how to get sharp pictures of birds in flight. There's probably 5 things we're going to look at today, and we'll do them one at a time. But the first thing obviously is to be in a place where you can practice a lot, and this is a place called Abberton Reservoir. I was here a couple of weeks ago with a friend called JP Lamoureux, and we had a cracking day here and a fingering hoe wick. So apologies for being back here again. My next video, I'm definitely on a different location. It'll be probably the Norfolk Broads and photographing the wildlife there. But this is a fantastic place for birds in flight, and that's what this video is all about. When it comes to getting sharp pictures of birds in flight, probably shutter speed is one of the most important things. Now we need a fast enough shutter speed to freeze the motion of that animal. And you normally hear people start, other photographers say start at 1/2000th of a second for birds in flight. And I think that's a good shout actually. Generally, it will get most birds, it will make your pictures sharp of most birds in flight. A 2,000th of a second, good place to start. But it is a little bit more nuanced than that. It will depend on the speed of the subject, of course. So if something's slow moving, like let's say a heron, you probably only need a 500th of a second to get a sharp picture. If you've got a faster animal, something like maybe a common tern, you probably need maybe 1,000th, 2,000th of a second. Then if you were doing a small woodland bird taking off, you maybe need 1/3200th or maybe a 4,000th of a second. So it depends on the subject. Now, the reason this is important is because when light levels start to drop, then your ISO is going to start to go up. And the higher the ISO, the more digital noise we're going to get in our pictures. So if we know we're only going to photograph slow moving birds, then it makes sense to drop that shutter speed down, because that reduces our ISO, reduces our digital noise. If we know we're photographing fast moving birds, then obviously we've got to stick with the really fast shutter speed. Now, there are occasions when you don't know what you're going to photograph. In a place like this, like Abberton Reservoir, I might have herons come across, spoonbills. I've already seen herons, spoonbills, common terns. So there's fast moving birds and there's slow moving birds. So it makes sense to set a fast enough shutter speed to freeze the motion of all of those animals. So my go-to setting here would be the 1/2000th of a second. Now, as I say, excuse the noise in the background. I'm just going to crack on because it is a causeway. But as I say, this is the best place, probably one of the best places close to where I live, to photograph birds in flight. If you look at this heron, this is the sort of subject that can be shot at 1/500th of a second. Now, it's always better if you can get 1,000th of a second, or in this case 2,000th of a second. But because it's a slow moving bird, and if you've got good panning techniques, in other words, the camera lens follows the bird at the same rate as the bird's flying, then you can shoot at lower shutter speeds, as I've already mentioned. This common tern was shot at 2,000th of a second, and again, if it's sort of held up by the wind, so it's not moving as quickly, so sometimes if you've got a windy day and that bird is slowed down, you can shoot with a slower shutter speed, but I'd generally like to get a 2,000th of a second or more for something like a common tern. And then if you look at these mallards, again, they're fast flying birds, so 1/2000th of a second. But if you look at the last picture of a mallard, this was shot at 1/800th of a second. But because the panning technique is good, the bird is still sharp. But if you look at the wingtips on this bird, they're slightly blurred. And that can be quite a nice technique, really. If you've got a panning technique that enables you to get a sharp picture of the bird's head and body, but shooting at a slightly slower shutter speed, and you can get a little bit of movement in the wingtips of that bird in flight, it can add a bit of energy to the picture. So don't rule that out. But what I would suggest is make sure you can get perfectly sharp pictures first before you start maybe creating using creative shutter speed in this way. So we've talked about getting the right shutter speed to enable us to get a sharp picture of a bird in flight. The second part of the equation is obviously focusing and focus modes, because we need to nail the focusing, and it's really hard for birds in flight. You've got a fast moving subject, We're normally shooting with a low F number to give us a fast shutter speed, so we've got minimum depth of field. So that focusing has got to be bang on correct. Otherwise, if the picture is not going to be sharp, and we want the bird's head and the bird's eye to be sharp. So I'm shooting with my Nikon Z8 now with a 180 to 600 millimeter zoom lens. So I've got animal eye tracking and bird eye tracking, and it generally works pretty well for birds in flight, especially if the bird is against a plain background like the sky. If it's against a complex background, sometimes it might hunt a little bit, but generally I find most shots it's working. So if you've got bird eye detect, I would definitely use that. But if you've got a complex background, rather than having the whole frame active, so the camera's going to pick that bird out from the whole frame when I'm through the viewfinder, I often use a smaller box. So I'm giving the autofocus system a helping hand, and I make sure the box is over the bird, then the eye tracking can pick that bird up. But you generally don't need to do that if the bird's against a plain sky. But if it's against a complex background of trees and branches and stuff, you might have to do that. If you haven't got animal eye tracking, then I would use a group of autofocus points, because it's very hard to get one single autofocus point on the bird's head as it's moving through the sky. So use a group. I used to use a group of 5 because that was accurate enough to not bring in or focus on the wingtips, but it wasn't. But it wasn't as hard as getting one single autofocus point on the bird's head. And of course, I'd use continuous focusing, so the camera's continually refocusing as we're taking our pictures. Now I've got my, as I've probably mentioned already in this video, my 180 to 600 millimeter zoom lens. And the reason I've got that with me is because I'm doing birds in flight, and it's a light enough lens for me to be able to hand hold. And I think when it comes to birds in flight, it's a really good option if you can hand hold the lens. Now, my prime lens is really, really heavy because it's an older prime lens, so it's almost impossible to hand hold. So if I'm using that lens, then what I've normally got to do is I've got to put it on sort of either a fluid head like this one or a gimbal head, and that does, although it gives me free movement, it still makes it harder to track a bird in flight. So I find hand holding is really useful when it comes to locating the subject quickly, and I get shots that I wouldn't have got if I was using the big lens with a gimbal. Now I do use a big lens with a fluid head, and it is successful, but it's just a little bit more cumbersome. So if you can move quickly with this sort of setup, that's a really good thing. And in fact, I got a picture of, let's put that over there. I got a picture of a Great Crested Grebe in flight, first time ever, and they really don't fly very often. And it flew across, and I just picked it up, and because I had the, I could hand hold, I could pick it out quickly, pan with it, and I've got some really good shots. And as I say, I've never got shots of Great Crested Grebe in flight. It was amazing, absolutely amazing actually. My first ever. I've only ever seen Great Crested Grebe fly once before, and I didn't get a picture of it. This time I got it, and I don't think I would have got that shot using a heavier lens. Along with getting the correct focus and obviously using the right shutter speed, I think one of the most important things when it comes to getting sharp pictures of birds in flight is to get on those birds quickly. So in other words, get them in the viewfinder and then have a really smooth sort of panning action. And I find it's most successful if you can spot a bird from the distance, get the camera on the bird and then track it in, and just keep it in the viewfinder as it gets closer and closer. It's the most successful way to get birds in flight. Now, as I say, I'm using my 180 to 600 millimeter zoom lens here because it's light and easily hand holdable. And I find for birds in flight, that's really good. I do have a prime lens, but that's really too heavy to hand hold, so I have to use it, as I say, on the fluid head. Now, the other thing about a zoom lens that I find really useful is the fact that you can, when you're looking for the bird actually in the sky, with a long lens, it's such a narrow angle of view, and sometimes it's quite hard to pick it out. if you're using a prime lens. You've got to get it really on the right spot in the sky, certainly with a 600mm. The beauty of a zoom lens is you can zoom out, find the bird, and then zoom in and then track it. And as I say, the quicker you can get onto that bird, the quicker the autofocus is going to lock on and the more sharp pictures you're going to get. So it's really, really useful to be able to zoom in and zoom out. Now, I'm not saying that prime lenses are not good. And modern prime lenses, like the 600s and the 500s, are much lighter than my prime lens, which is really heavy. So you can hand hold those. But I still think the zoom lens just has the edge. Oh, we've got a heron coming over there. So let's get that. It just has the edge when it comes to actually finding that animal in the first place, that bird, because as I say, you can zoom out, have a wider angle of view, so it's easier to spot it in the sky, zoom in, and the autofocus locks on. So it's a really good option, I think, sometimes. Okay guys, so I'm moving up the causeway now because at the other end we've got nesting spoonbills, and they're fantastic water birds that I definitely want to photograph again this year. They've been nesting in Essex for about I think the 4th year now, and that was the first time 4 years ago for about 500 or 600 years that we've had nesting spoonbills, and they're fantastic water birds, about the size of a heron, with these weird spoon-shaped bills, hence they're called spoonbills. Again, really sorry about the noise in the background, but you can't nod it along here. But I've already got some cracking birds in flight shots. I've got common terns, got spoonbills, Great Crested Grebe in flight, mallards, geese. It's been absolutely brilliant. This is such a great place for birds in flight, and it's a really good place to hone your skills. And I would say one of the important things is practice. So go to a location that's going to give you lots of practice for birds in flight. You don't be waiting for 3 or 4 hours and get one bird in flight and then stop and wait another couple of hours. You want them coming in all the time so that you can hone your skills. Practice definitely makes perfect. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you could give it a thumbs up, a like, that would be brilliant. It always helps my channel. And if you haven't already subscribed, if you can consider subscribing, that would be also great. As I say, birds in flight, probably the hardest thing you're going to photograph. So if you can nail birds in flight, you can probably photograph anything else when it comes to wildlife photography. So let me know how your birds in flight photography is going, and let me know if you found this video useful. So thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you on my next one. Bye for now, guys.